Have you ever dreamt of building your own home? With building costs increasing 30% over the past 2 years, is it a far-fetched fantasy for most people to have that dream? Or with the cost of homes at an all-time high, is it simply the smart thing to do? With the rising popularity of prefab homes and their modern aesthetic and the perception of lower building costs, is building your own dream home more attainable than ever? With so many people pursuing their dream of building, why do you see so many lots for sale with plans? Did they change their mind, lose interest, or did they underestimate what it would take to build their dream home? My name is David Hargreaves, a top 5 realtor in Healdsburg, working with lots of people just like you looking to buy or build a home in wine country. I've even been down the road of buying a property, knock it down and build my own dream home. I even got permit ready plans developed, but then changed my mind and sold the property. So why did I spend over $100,000 on my own plans and then change my mind? In this video, I hope I help you understand what is involved and how you can avoid making the same mistake as I did if you're looking to build your own home. The first thing to think about if you're going to be looking to build a home is where. As with buying a house, the location is probably the single biggest decision you'll make. Not just the geographic location, but what type of lot. If you look at the price of lots, you'll see some lots that range from, $100,000 all the way up to $3 million and beyond. But don't be fooled, because as with anything, there is a reason a lot costs just $100,000. You really do get what you pay for. So what are the things that you should think about as part of choosing and then buying a lot to build your home? The first thing is, where's the location? And as well as the geographic area and whether it's a rural or urban setting, there are some other important considerations that will impact the economic viability of building a home. One easy way to think about it is that the cost of a lot should be no more than 25% of the value of the finished home. For example, if you spend $1 million on a lot, you need the finished home to be worth $4 million or more to make it make economic sense. One of the challenges, as build costs have increased over time, is making sure that the cost of the build plus the cost of the lot do not end up being more than the value of the finished home. This is not only economic madness, but it also makes it impossible to get financing. So a really important thing to consider. The second thing to think about is it a flat lot or is it a sloping lot? I mean, this is fairly obvious to say, but definitely worth mentioning. If you purchase a lot that's on a steep slope, it will be more expensive to build on compared to a flat lot. Similarly, if the lot that you purchase requires extensive grading or tree removal, these costs can all start to add up. The third thing to think about is the lot a burn lot or not? While a lot of people might be put off buying a burnt lot on which to build a house because a home's already burnt down there are some significant advantages to purchasing a burnt lot. The good news in Sonoma County certainly is that the county will waive impact fees unless there is an increase in the square footage compared to the house that burnt down. There are numerous other benefits. For example, they're a lot more relaxed about some of the code requirements. There's also no requirement to install solar for any rebuild on a burnt lot. The other benefit is that there's almost certainly be significant infrastructure in place already. For example, there will almost certainly be a driveway in place and all the utilities in place. I'll talk more about that in a bit more detail, but even something like a driveway can get very expensive at an average build cost of $20 per foot. The fourth thing to think about is, are you on city sewer or will you need a septic system? This is a key consideration, whether the lot is on a city sewer or will require a septic system. As long as the city sewer is right at the edge of the lot, it will be pretty straightforward to hook it up and will likely cost less than $10,000. If, however, you need to put in a septic system, then there are a lot of factors to take into account, not least the incremental cost and time that this will incur in the build schedule. When you take into account all of the soft costs, putting a septic in, it can cost you $80,000 to $100,000 and can take a year if it goes well, and it can even take 2 years if it's a little more complicated. The ideal scenario is to purchase a lot that has already had what's called a perk test, and ideally a septic design for a system that will support the number of bedrooms in your ideal home design. Next thing to think about is, are you on public water or a well? Again, choosing a lot that is on a city water is definitely the easiest route to go. If there are water hookups at the edge of the lot, you can expect to pay no more than, $8,000 to get connected. However, if you are looking at a more rural lot, then you'll need a well. The majority of properties, even if they're not a burn lot, will be sold with an existing well. This is particularly important right now, as there is a moratorium on drilling new wells in Sonoma County, which lasts well into next year, and this will slow things down quite considerably. If you do need to drill a well, the cost is dependent on a few things. How many times you need to drill before you find water, and how deep the well is once you have to drill it. There are of course no guarantees, although any decent well company will be able to tell you what your chances are of finding water in any particular given area or piece of land. It's also worth bearing in mind that the minimum water requirement for building a residence in Sonoma County is just over 1 gallon per minute. So any additional living structure will require an additional gallon per minute. So what is the cost of installing a well? The cost to drill a well and then put in the necessary well equipment will likely cost you between $50,000 and $60,000. The next thing to think about is how will you connect to electricity. Most sites will have power at the edge of a lot. As long as you aren't having to run power hundreds of yards, the cost is fairly manageable. For example, a client of mine who has a lot which is about, it's about an acre, but it has got power sort of to the road, he got a quote of $9,800 to have the power connected, as well as have a temporary power pole during construction. Also, with advances in solar power and also battery storage, it's now a lot more cost effective and entirely feasible to be entirely off the grid if you're looking to build in a more remote location. So having found the ideal lot where you plan to build, we now need to start looking at some of the build costs. For the purpose of this video, I'm using an example of a home that is currently being built in Santa Rosa. The home is a 4-bed, 4.5 bath home totaling just over 4,000 square feet with a 3-car garage on a 1-acre lot with a pool. The lot was purchased for just over $300,000, and because it was a burn lot, it already has a lot of the infrastructure in place and the cost savings in the build and the fees that I've already explained. For the purpose of this, I've broken down the costs into 13 different categories to give you an idea of what you might expect to spend on building a home like this today. The first thing to think about is fees. Fees and more fees. Unfortunately, the first thing you'll start spending money on is fees. Fees for architects, fees for draftsmen, fees for surveyors, engineers, and of course, the county fees or the city fees. You will soon learn that Sonoma County or the city where you are building have no end of ways to charge you additional fees. I should say from personal experience that one area fees can run away is the cost of the architect. I think a good architect is worth their weight in gold. I would strongly advise against agreeing to work with an architect who charges a percentage of the build fee. There are lots of ways to limit the architect's fees, which I don't have time to cover here, but you should expect to pay a minimum of $30,000 on architectural fees alone. If we're to summarize the soft costs, we can expect to pay about $95,000. You've got architect fees, permit fees, impact fees, engineering fees, soil test fees, insurance costs. Add that all together, it's $94,500. The second thing I want to cover is infrastructure costs. If the lot is in a city with access to city services, the cost to hook up water, electric, sewer and gas, you should be budget for about $28,000 for the various different connections. However, if you are planning to build in a more rural location where you need to install a septic system, put in a well, the costs can quickly escalate in excess of $180,000. The key here is knowing that when you buy the lot, you will find water and you will be able to put a septic system in that supports the house that you're looking to build. For this home that I'm using as an example, it was a burn lot, as I already mentioned. So the infrastructure was pretty much in place. So the costs are minimal. If we look at the cost for a city lot, they can be summarized as follows. With water, $4,000, sewer hookup, $4,000, electrical hookup, $10,000, gas hookup, $10,000, so bringing to a total of $28,000. The third thing I want to talk about is site costs. If you're on a clear, flat lot with no need for expansive grading and excavation and no requirement to build, expensive retaining walls, you'll be able to keep these costs fairly, in check. On a relatively simple site, you can still end up spending nearly $80,000 by the time you've spent $50,000 in grading and excavation, $25,000 on clearing the lot. If you buy a property with a tear down on it, then demoing the old structure could cost as much as $50,000 in its own right. That being said, it is always worth approaching your local fire department, because I know in some areas the fire service will, they'll actually burn the structure down for free as part of training firefighters. I mean, they'll even do the cleanup afterwards in many cases. It's definitely something that would be fun to see. The fourth thing I want to talk about are landscaping costs. As with many of these categories, it's easy to forget just how expensive these costs can be if you go crazy with your plans. When contractors quote a build of, say, $500 per square foot, they'll often not include driveways and hardscaping, which can make a huge difference to the overall cost. Now, for an average amount of concrete work, it's easy to get through $50,000 worth of concrete. For landscaping, the big ticket item is always the amount of formal planting and, of course, whether or not you want a pool. If you are building a pool on anything but a flat lot, particularly with the way pool costs have increased, you can expect to spend close to $250,000 by the time you've put in, all the pool equipment, done the hardscaping around the pool, added all the outdoor kitchen. The other item that people often forget about when it comes to landscaping is how expensive decking is. Regardless of whether you're using a high-end material like redwood or even bamboo, you'll need to allow at least $20,000 even for a simple deck. The next cost I want to talk about is building the structure itself. This is where the costs really start adding up, as you'd probably expect. I mean, this is the meat and potato of the build. The cost of pouring the foundation will vary based on the type of soil and the terrain, because that will dictate the type of foundation required. For the 4,000 square foot house in this example, the cost of the foundation is $150,000. And then the cost of the framing the house is a further $320,000. By the time you add in trusses, a regular shingle roof, the gutters, the siding, the external trim, you've added another $136,000. Once you have the external structure up, you still need to pay for the drywall, which will cost $60,000, and insulation to meet all the sort of Title 24 environmental standards. This will cost you another $24,000. This takes the total build cost of the actual sort of structure to $686,000, to get the structure up and to get it weatherproofed. So as you can see, by the time you add in the cost of ffoundation, the framing, trusses, the roof, the gutters, exterior siding, trim, drywall, insulation, you can very quickly see how it adds up to $686,000. The other thing I want to talk about is the windows and doors. This is another big ticket item. This is an area where there's definitely a large variance between, the low end and the high end. I'm sure you've been to a house where you open the beautiful, Fleetwood sliders, and they just feel expensive. I personally feel like it's an area worth spending on, because you'll notice it every day. Every time you open that door, it'll just give you a warm and fuzzy feeling. The other expensive door systems are the sort of the bifold doors, or the door sliding systems that disappear into the wall. Architects love these for the indoor-outdoor living aesthetic, but in my experience, people who have them, they don't really tend to use them, because they're either a hassle to use, or once they're open, there's no real way to keep bugs out. For a 4,000 square foot home, you can expect to spend, $75,000 on the window and door package, and then an additional $16,000 on the garage door. In addition, you will need to budget another, say, $35,000 on all of the internal and then the external doors. And as with many of these items, the costs really do start adding up. Just the window and the door package comes out at $126,000 for this home. So as you can see, you add in the windows, sliding doors, the garage door, internal, external doors, then you can see how you very quickly get to the $126,000. So the next thing I want to talk about is plumbing. This isn't exactly the sexy bit, but the rough plumbing will cost approximately $50,000. The HVAC system will cost another $35,000. And the sprinkler system, which is mandatory in all new builds, as well as remodels where a significant percentage of the house is being remodeled, will cost $18,000. By the time you add in a few smaller items, you get to a cost of $110,000 on the plumbing. And that excludes the faucets, which I've included in the finishes budget. So the rough plumbing is $50,000, HVAC, $35,000, sprinkler system, $18,000, water heater, say $3,000, a few miscellaneous items, $4,000, gets you to a budget of $110,000 for for the plumbing. So let's talk about the electrical. The rough electrical will probably cost about $45,000 for a house of this size. It is worth noting that if you ever undertake a large remodel on an older home, an electrician will often opt to rewire the entire house, leaving the old wiring in there as opposed to patching new wiring into the old wiring. So again, for the purposes of presenting these costs, then I've put all of the lighting fixtures and all the electrical finishes into the finishes budget. So the electrical budget is, $45,000. So now let's talk about the finishes. I know when I got the plans for my house and then saw the contractor bid, which broke down the plans item by item, the most depressing part of it was the amount of money that was sunk into things like the foundation and site work costs, the things that I would never see. At least once we get onto the budget for finishes, they're all things that we will see and touch every day. These are also costs when you need to have some very strict allowances in place, or else you'll very quickly blow your budget away. If you really do want to import that marble from Italy, then great, but don't expect your finished costs to come in anything like on budget. It's easy to spend $10,000 on a nice fireplace, or $10,000 on all the plumbing fixtures, or $3,000 on the door hardware. If you have 4 bathrooms, then you'll need 4 lots of shower enclosures, and glass will cost likely $30,000. This particular project allocated $3,000 for bathtubs, but we all know how easy it is to spend a lot more than that even on a single tub. Even the tiling and the countertops for the kitchen and bathrooms will likely cost you $25,000. Another large ticket item in the finishes budget are the appliances. Like windows and doors, these are definitely an area where it's worth investing money, if nothing else for the resale value. I love to cook, so it's important to me to have a nice big range. Buyers also love their high-end appliances such as the Wolf ranges with their red controls. You should allocate $50,000 for the appliances package and $20,000 is for that, impressive entry gate. This gives a grand total of $170,000 on the finishes. So now let's talk about carpentry, including, the cabinets and also the floors. In any house of this size, there are a lot of cabinets in, kitchens, you've got bathrooms, you've got closets in bedrooms. Kitchen cabinetry is another one of those areas where you can spend money very quickly. However, you can get, middle of the range kitchen cabinetry for $60,000 and then expect to pay another $10,000 each for, closet and bathroom cabinetry. The cost of flooring a 4,000 square foot home will likely cost, $60,000 for, an engineered wood floor. In total, by the time you add in all the trim around the doors and the baseboards, you can expect the carpentry budget to be $160,000. Flooring is $60,000, kitchen cabinets $60,000, bathroom cabinets say $10,000, interior trim $20,000, closets $10,000. Gets you to the budget of $160,000. For the painting, it's pretty easy, but it's also easy to forget about painting. But even the indoor and exterior painting will cost you $40,000. Typically, a house of this size will cost a similar amount to paint internally as externally. So allowing $20,000 for the interior and $20,000 for the exterior will be sufficient. The next thing to talk about is a miscellaneous budget. Throughout a build project, there will always be miscellaneous expenditure for items that you didn't plan for. For example, any site will need to be secured with fencing and cameras, given the cost of materials involved. There will likely be trash fees that can quickly get to a cost of, $5,000. Even with realistic estimates, it's worth setting aside, $100,000 for miscellaneous items that will come up. I know it sounds strange to consider that amount of money for small items, but trust me, you'll be glad that you put that money to one side. So the final thing, general contractor costs. Maybe it's fitting that the 13th item on the list is the general contractor costs. Lucky for some, eh? Any contractor will expect to be paid a 10% markup on all the subcontractor costs as their overhead cost, and then will expect an additional 10% as their profit on the job. For a build of this size, this adds an additional $380,000 onto the cost of the build. So for people who've never worked with a contractor on a big project of this nature, the size of this cost is often a surprise. But, a contractor, they need to make their money in this. So the contractor markup you can expect to be $185,000, and the same for the contractor profit gets you to your figure of, $370,000. So what does all this come to when we add it up? The grand total of $2.223 million for a 4,000 square foot home with a pool, 3-car garage, 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, and an office. This equates to $552 per square foot as an all-in cost. This includes everything, including the soft costs, the pool, the landscaping, the infrastructure. Throughout this worked example, I've given actual costs to give you an idea of realistic pricing. However, it is important to recognise you could go into a kitchen shop and spend $200,000 on cabinetry and countertops, and this would immediately double our kitchen budget. So to get to this number, you do need to be careful on every single item that you're choosing. So just to recap, here's the list of all the different costs. You've got your soft costs, the infrastructure, the site costs, the landscaping including pool, the build costs, the windows and doors, the finishes, the plumbing, the electrical, the carpentry, miscellaneous, and then the general contractor costs gets us to the 2.22 million figure. So in this example, the lot was purchased for a very good price at $303,000. And with a build cost of 2.2 million, the total all-in cost is 2.5 million. Once this house is built, it will be worth a minimum of 2.25 million. So, do you still want to build your dream home? As you can see from the economics, building your own home isn't a surefire way to create value. But the good news is that you get your dream home, which is perfect in every way for you, for the same price you would pay for a home that somebody else designed and built and has lived in. In my mind, if you can build your dream home with the level of finish you want in a location that you absolutely love, and it's worth what you paid to build it, then that has to be a win. Where it often goes wrong is where people either decide the location is not where they want to build their dream home, or through the process of designing the home and choosing the finishes, the budget runs away with them. So this is the mistake I made. I chose a location that I could no longer see myself living in for a significant period of time. And the design process meant we designed something that was overbuilt for the area, so it just didn't make economic sense to build it and then to sell it. If you're looking to build your own home and want help thinking through the process and want guidance on finding the perfect lot for the home of your dreams, or even to find the perfect lot where you can, build a home with a view of selling it, then please do get in touch. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, then please click the like button and subscribe to see more videos like this. Until the next video, go well.